Just have one item on the agenda this morning. Item number one is a meeting to accept into committee all substitute ordinances related to the civilian oversight of the Chicago Police Department. This is a meeting only to accept said substitutes. There will be no debate or vote taken on these matters. Each of you should have received these substitutes ordinances as amended this morning in your email. We will begin now with a roll call. So if I could ask each of you to please unmute your mics. Thank you. Vice Chair Osterman.
Present.
Alderman Sawyer.
Present.
Alderman Mitchell. Alderman Mitchell.
Present.
Alderman Thompson.
Here.
Alderman Lopez.
Present, Chairman.
Alderman Curtis.
Present.
Alderman Scott. Alderman Scott. Alderman Irving. Alderman Irving. Alderman Reboyes.
Present.
Alderman Mitz.
Present.
Alderman Sposato.
Nick Sposato is here.
Alderman Nugent. Alderman Nugent.
Here.
Alderman
Present.
Alderman
Present.
Napolitano.
Present, Chairman.
Alderman Smith. Alderman Smith.
Here.
Alderman Tunney. Alderman Tunney. Alderman Gardner. Alderman Gardner. Alderman Martin.
Present.
Alderman Silverstein.
Present.
We have 15 members present. We do have a quorum. At this time, we will begin the public comment period. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. We'll begin our public speakers with Mr. Tim Anderson. Mr. Anderson, have you joined us?
Alderman Burnett is here.
Have you,
Alderman
Cardone? Yeah, for those non-committee members, I do apologize. For those non-committee members that are present, I will look to the panel, to the participants panel, and include each of you as present for today's committee meeting. Mr. Anderson, Mr. Tim Anderson.
Hello? Hello?
You may begin, Mr. Anderson. We have 3 minutes.
I'm Tim Anderson. I'm a resident of the South Loop in the 3rd Ward. CPD is still under a consent decree that has deemed Chicago's policing racially unconstitutional, partly due to failures of accountability. For that reason, it's legally imperative that Chicago create a counterbalance to the police through CPAC. Chicago has a long history of independent civilian oversight with insufficient power. The police board, which hears police misconduct cases and advises on policy, was created in 1960. And COPA, which investigates police misconduct, has roots in OPS, which was created in 1974 and made independent and renamed IPRA in 2007. After Rahm's cover-up of Laquan McDonald's murder, Mayor Lightfoot, as chair of the Police Accountability Task Force, documented CPD's systemic racism and suggested 1, that IPRA needed a new name, COPA, and 2, that a community board modeled on CPAC was needed in part to select its leader. Since then, she has backtracked, launching and abandoning GAPA and promising her own plan that never came. Over the summer, CPD brutalized protesters, missed consent decree deadlines, and ignored community input. And then last month, a video was released showing CPD's brutal mistreatment of Anjanette Young. COPA failed her, and so would have GABA because they are purely advisory. At the root of crime and police misconduct is an unequal economic system. Policing, in tandem with disinvestment from the public sector, fuels the predatory processes of displacement and gentrification. In Bronzeville, that's as apparent as anywhere in Chicago. You can see it in the teardowns of public housing along the State Street corridor and the closing of hospitals. Even the district commander described much crime as a product of interpersonal disagreements between people struggling to get by. Yet when residents asked for resources to address the symptoms, their alderman delivered an austerity budget and asked them to organize their neighbors to better cooperate with CPD. In the South Loop, that dynamic empowers groups who take neighborhood watch tips from nearby communities with a history of racist violence. After months of unanswered emails, calls, and protests, one in which I was thrown to the ground by an officer in my own neighborhood, I was pleased to see my Alderman Pat Dowell attend a briefing on the CPAC ordinance yesterday, but I still expect more from her and the rest of the City Council. The people of Chicago and the courts are doing their part. Now we need you, the City Council, to lead. If you continue your deference to the downtown business interests and property managers who invoked white flight in editorials over the summer, the cycle of scandal, protest, and insufficient reform will continue. Attend a briefing and pass police accountability with teeth. Pass CPAC now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Our next speaker is Nathan Horton. Mr. Horton. Mr. Horton, have you joined us today? Okay, our next speaker is Ms. Bertha Purnell.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Horton is here. He was just pressing.
Sorry, I'm here.
Please go ahead and proceed, Mr. Horton. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you to the members of this committee for allowing this public comment. My name is Nathan Horton. I'm a resident of the 48th Ward, currently represented by Alderman Harry Osterman. I'm speaking today in support of the reintroduction of CPAC for this committee's review, and I urge you to give it meaningful consideration and passage. Like many across our city, I spent last summer in the streets of Chicago demanding meaningful change to the policing and criminal justice systems which have time and time again shown themselves to be the vehicles of racist oppression in this city and across the country. Direct action led to the formation of communities, and support for CPAC soared alongside. I talked to hundreds of neighbors and residents in the 48th Ward about CPAC, and almost everyone I spoke with agreed that community control of the police would be an effective and democratic reform. But don't take my word for it. 1,655 residents of the 48th Ward signed postcards to you, Harry, in support of CPAC. Hundreds attended CPAC rallies in the ward. This was replicated many times over across the city. Coalitions have formed that now stand at your door waiting to work with you on doing what is right for our communities, for our friends and families, and for our futures. If you care about the safety of all Chicagoans, and if you are genuine in your professed desire for police reform, then it is time for you to take the CPAC ordinance seriously. We have built the support you need to move forward. The time is now. Civilian oversight entities like COPA are powerless to change decades of destructive policing practices targeting non-white communities and disproportionately harassing, arresting, brutalizing, sexually assaulting, disappearing, and killing Black and brown Chicagoans with impunity. Let's be clear, we don't want proportionate policing that continues these violent practices. We want police to stop being the answer to problems that they cannot fix, and we want the concept of public safety to extend to everyone who calls Chicago home. That is why communities that have been most impacted by destructive policing must have democratic control over the police and the power to make disciplinary, budgeting, hiring, and firing decisions. The city of Chicago has demonstrated for far too long that it is unable to stop police abuses. The people of the city do not trust their feckless leaders on the city council to deliver change. What we have seen instead are raised bridges, botched home raids, cover-ups, and more killings. More police do not keep us safe. We have the highest number of police per capita of any U.S. city, and yet violent crime stays the same. CPAC is just the beginning in the fight to transform our communities. We are sick and tired of our tax dollars being wasted as the death cult of neoliberal city management has left our communities in a place more segregated and unfairly resourced than half a century ago. You have created that. I know that my voice is just one in many in support in holding both Harry Osterman and this committee accountable to doing what is within their power to make this overwhelmingly popular ordinance law. And rest assured that we know that accountability is not just time set aside for public comment, frequently used to demonstrate feigned concern for the common interest. Accountability is the meaningful change that we demand, or the election of representatives that will listen to the people demanding it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Horton. Next speaker is Ms. Bertha Purnell, followed by Ted Pearson. Ms. Bertha Purnell, are you with us today?
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Bertha. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you all for having me and to allow me to make this comment. I am a resident of Boston. I am really concerned about my safety and the people in my community. I am asking all of you all to do your due diligence and vote. If not, look at the legal briefing for CPAC. We need someone other than the police to look at what is happening with the police. I deserve to be safe. I do not feel every time I walk into my home and I start to take off my clothes that the police might invade my privacy. As I am driving down the street, I do not believe that when I see the police, I should be fearful. I think that if they are being made to be held accountable and things are being transparent, that we can all live a little safer. The amount of trauma that is forced upon us because we do not feel safe. I am a tax-paying citizen. I've never committed a crime, but I feel like I'm under the microscope. I feel unsafe with the police. We need someone else looking into the police. Please, if you all have not looked into the legal briefing on CPAC, please do so. It won't cost you anything. Your constituents deserve to feel safe. We have enough trauma without this additional trauma. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Ms. Purnell. Our next speaker is Ted Pearson, followed by Melanie Butler. Mr. Pearson, are you with us?
Please press *6 to unmute on your phone.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Mr. Pearson. Go ahead and proceed. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Ted Pearson. I'm with the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, and I've lived in the 43rd Ward for 56 years. In the past few weeks, we've again seen a vivid example of a total failure of the city to hold its police department accountable. The video recorded violent break-in to the home and subjugation of Anjanette Young by officers clearly infected by racist attitudes. They treated this Black woman who was in her own home without clothes like an animal. That the mayor and the corporation council did everything they could to bury this incident and cover it up shows that nothing has changed. This is the murder of Laquan McDonald all over again. Since Mayor Lightfoot took office 18 months ago, at least eight people, have been shot and killed by Chicago police. Hundreds of men and women, overwhelmingly Black and Latinx, remain in prison as a result of so-called confessions wrung from suspects by Chicago police. The city's apologized and set up a meager fund to help restore a few of these survivors, but it's done nothing to get those still wrongfully in prison out. In the summer of 2018, this committee held hearings all over the city on police accountability. They were attended by many hundreds of people from neighborhoods all over the city. The overwhelming majority of people who spoke called for community control of the police and the CPAC ordinance, which establishes an all-elected body in control of the police. There is also a watered-down so-called oversight proposal called GAPA. It's a far cry from community control. It's not directly elected, but appointed. Its work is subject to the mayor's approval. Now, Mayor Lightfoot has rejected even that watered-down version of the original proposal. No one knows yet what the mayor's new proposal will look like, except that it will change nothing. This is Rahm Emanuel version 2. Passing anything less than CPAC would set back the need for police accountability and compliance with the federal court consent decree, which the city is legally bound to implement. It may create a temporary illusion that something has changed, but there'll be no end to police shootings, murders, break-ins, torture, and frame-ups, and no end to multi-million-dollar settlements at taxpayer expense for police torture, wrongful conviction, and wrongful death. As a lifelong Chicagoan of 78 years, I urge you to vote CPAC out of this committee with a do-pass recommendation and empower the people in their communities to end police crimes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Ms. Melanie Butler. Ms. Melanie Butler, followed by Michael Aaron. Butler, are you here with us today?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning, Ms. Butler. Yes, I can hear you. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Melanie Butler. I'm a resident of the 48th Ward under Alderman Osterman. I'm calling today because of the long history of Chicago Police Department brutality and human rights abuses, and how those abuses have gone completely unchecked by the city. In fact, they've been variously encouraged, ignored, or covered up in turns. From the atrocities committed under John Burge to the death of Laquan McDonald, the raid on Anjanette Young's home, and the 7 people shot and killed by CPD in 2020 alone, it's clear that this is an endemic, systemic, and deep-seated problem. Meanwhile, this is a problem that taxpayers spend billions of dollars to sustain, despite the fact that we have people going hungry in this city, people going homeless, people without access to health care. The list goes on. The supposed goal of public safety is to keep the community safe. The supposed goal of CPD is to serve the people of Chicago. There's ample evidence that that is not the function CPD serves. There has been evidence of that for years. But nothing substantial has been done to address this problem because those with the power to address it are not incentivized to do so. The entire police accountability system seems to rest in the hands of the mayor. I really wish that the interests of the mayor aligned with the interests of the community, but history has shown us again and again that is not the case, especially for our Black and Brown communities. We know you cannot effectively serve 2 masters. So an accountability system put in place by the mayor is eventually going to choose between serving the mayor's interests and serving the community's interests, and we've already seen how that goes. The only accountability system that can work for the interests of the community is one that is put in place directly by the community through election. It's only public safety if it is designed and endorsed by the public. That means actual power to determine and enforce policy as a community. That's what CPAC does, unlike GABA and other measures, and that's why we need it. I really urge you to consider CPAC seriously and pass it through this committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Butler. Our next speaker is Michael Aaron, followed by Richard Horney. Mr. Aaron, are you here with us today?
Mr. Aaron, please press *6 on your phone to unmute.
Do you hear me? Hi.
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you, Mr. Aaron. Go ahead and proceed.
Thank you. My name is Michael Aaron. I'm a longtime resident of Chicago's 5th Ward. I'm a member of the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, and also with Indivisible Chicago South Side. Chicago Police Department has a long history of crime against its citizens. Racial profiling, harassment, excessive force, assault, torture, and murder. Mostly against Black and Brown people. To this day, we have people wrongfully in prison due to confessions tortured out of them during the John Burge era, and today we're confronted by the abuse of Anjanette Young. Everyone knows it's wrong, but we've been unwilling to fix it. With CPAC, the people of Chicago can have actual control over police policy, police budgets, key personnel, the use of force, and investigation of police wrongdoing. City government has failed us in all these areas. We must have a new and a transparent way forward. The issue of CPAC is before the committee at an auspicious moment. At a time when our democracy is under attack by a law-breaking president, in the same way that government must be by the consent of the governed, policing must be by the consent of the policed, the consent of the voters, the consent of the taxpayers. Our police force and its openly racist FOP union need meaningful citizen control, not a commission, not a vague oversight panel with the power to write a harsh report. We require a healthy measure of control. There are legislative briefings on CPAC being held for aldermen, organized by Alderman Ramirez Rosa. 2 briefings were held yesterday. There are 2 more opportunities at 11 and 3 p.m. on Thursday, the 7th, and on Monday, the 11th. All aldermen should participate. The alternative to CPAC is no legislation or weak legislation leaving us with the status quo. A status quo of police abuse of people of color, a status quo of lies and cover-ups by the city, a status quo of protest by an enraged population, a status quo of budget-busting lawsuits, a status quo which is not sustainable. At any time, Chicago can and will be confronted by yet another police-generated crisis. City officials and aldermen need to ask themselves, am I taking the bold action today necessary to prevent this? Am I on the right side of this issue? I urge you to vote CPAC out of committee and get it passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aaron. Mr. Richard Pokorny, followed by Ms. Regina Russell Blue. Mr.
morning.
Corn, are you
You
with
can
us?
hear me now. Good morning, and thank you for allowing me to address this important issue today. My name is Rich Pokorny. I'm involved with the Community Renewal Society and the Grassroots Alliance for Police Accountability. My Unitarian faith holds that all people are children of our Creator and deserve respect no matter what their problems are. I have never been mistreated by police, but I am concerned with how people of color, people with low incomes, and people with mental illness issues have been treated by police. These include friends and acquaintances of mine, and I have heard stories of mistreatment from many of them. After hearing these honest stories from credible people, I changed my mind. I used to believe that police abuse was the result of a few bad apples in the bushel, that it would be very easy to clean them out before they caused others to rot. But after hearing from many people, I came to know that even though most police officers are good, moral people, it's not about a few bad apples. The whole tree is rotten and infected. The system is rotten and infected with cynicism. Good officers come under pressure to cover up and support a broken system. I managed a manufacturing plant for 30 years. I had OSHA inspections, reports to the EPA, and other ways I was held accountable. It was uncomfortable and irritating, and many times I didn't like it, but it was effective. I had no influence over these agencies, and that's why they were effective. OSHA, the EPA, consumer protection agencies, and others all function best when they function independently of the people and organizations they regulate. What I now know is that police accountability can only be effectively regulated if the regulators are independent. Recall the history of this in Chicago. Multiple iterations of new regulatory agencies failed over and over. A consent decree, millions of dollars paid many times to compensate abused people. How long will we continue on this path of failure? How long will you tolerate the cover-ups of acts like humiliating a naked woman in her home, shooting an unarmed person with mental illness, shooting unarmed young people, and so on? When will you take steps to create a commission that is really independent to enforce police accountability? How long will you allow this rotten system to continue? I urge you to approve the GAPA plan for a truly effective commission with civilian oversight so that all the honest police officers will regain the respect of the community. And you've heard a lot of disrespect just now. This plan is constitutional, reasonable, and will be effective. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pokorny. Our next speaker is Regina Russell Bloom. Ms. Russell Bloom.
Chairman, I don't see Ms. Regina Russell Bloom.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Alec Watson. Alec Watson.
Good morning, City Council members. My name is Alec. I'm a resident of the 2nd Ward. I'm calling in today to voice my support for the creation of a Civilian Police Accountability Council. Instituting CPAC would be the single biggest step we as a city could take in creating true accountability between the Chicago Police Department and the citizens of Chicago. At a time when CPD has missed more than 70% of its federal consent decree deadlines, at a time when new cases of brutality and misconduct are being uncovered, such as the horrifying treatment of Anjanette Young during the illegal raid on her home and the efforts to repress that body cam footage, and at a time when the people of Chicago have overwhelmingly, 87% in your last survey, demanded to divert money from the police to fund other essential services. At times like these, it is abundantly clear that something needs to be done. And what we are asking you to do, our city council members, is pass CPAC. CPAC gives us, the community members, a say in who polices us and how we are policed. Over 60,000 Chicagoans have signed on saying they support CPAC. This is what the community has been asking for many years, and this is what we're demanding now. We who advocate for CPAC strongly reject the GAPA ordinance as it introduces more pointless bureaucracy into the accountability process, while CPAC creates a clear channel of feedback flowing from the people. We also strongly reject any arguments that ultimate power to make decisions about the police should rest with the mayor alone or mayoral appointees. This is an offensive argument that denies the community agency over its own destiny and is extremely anti-democratic. Anytime we're presented with an opportunity to make one of our civic institutions more democratic, we should jump at that opportunity. CPAC is an elected board and would increase the community's participation in policing decisions. When the community is engaged and empowered, things improve. This is why we need to pass CPAC. When we empower our communities to determine for themselves what public safety looks like, we will see positive change. I urge each of you to recommend CPAC to pass and encourage your colleagues in the City Council to do so as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Our next speaker is Ms. Emily Pith, followed by Mr. Stephen Rothschild. Ms. Pith, are you with us?
Good morning. Yes, can you hear me?
Good morning, Ms. Pith. You have 3 minutes. You may proceed.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Emily Piss. I am a city employee and community member living in the Humboldt Park neighborhood in Chicago. I am here today to urge you to vote GAPA out of committee and to pass the GAPA ordinance now to implement this democratic, transparent, and transformative ordinance. One thing I want to note is that GAPA and CPAC are not oppositional. We are all working towards the same goal of ending police brutality and police misconduct in Chicago. But today I am here to talk about the GAPA ordinance and how it needs to be passed to ensure police accountability. Currently, there is no community body to oversee the Chicago Police Department, COPA, and the police board, or to play a role in policing and public safety decision-making. You can see the devastating toll that's taking on citizens every day with the recent video release showing police abusing their power and traumatizing internet young. The fact that the city tried to block this video from release tells us that we need a body that is holding the police accountable for their abuses. The GAPA ordinance is that ordinance. It fundamentally changes policing and public safety in our city. Because GAPA would create a democratic system that is grounded in our neighborhoods, and it would give the community strong powers to address their local public safety needs and priorities. GAPA is grounded in community from the neighborhoods all the way up to the city level. So the citywide commission would act on community priorities with substantial power. GAPA is transformative because it's created by community. There have been over 200 conversations in the past few years with community leaders, and the GAPA Coalition includes community organizations from across Chicago who have all given their input into the ordinance. GAPA is inherently grounded in our communities. District councils work locally in neighborhoods, and they can tailor their work to each neighborhood's specific needs, which vary across our vast city. GAPA is also accountable to the community. There are many ways for the community and district council members to hold the citywide commissioners accountable, as well as the police department and all related departments. GAPA also is protected from legal challenge. GAPA has made sure that the ordinance is consistent with state and federal law so that the ordinance will not be challenged legally. GAPA is fundamentally democratic. GAPA's district councils mean that your elected officials are the most local and the most responsive, so that they'll be able to tackle local neighborhood problems in specific districts. And finally, GAPA is ready to bring transformation now. GAPA did the work to make sure that the ordinance could be implemented smoothly and as soon as possible so that we can finally do something about the police misconduct and abuse in Chicago. So I urge you to vote GAPA out of committee and to pass the GAPA ordinance now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Pith. Our next speaker is Stephen Rothschild, followed by Mitchell Ward. Mr. Rothschild, are you with us today?
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Charlie Farrell.
Good morning, sir.
Thank you. My name is Steve Rothschild. I'm a family physician on the west side of the city, a resident of the 4th Ward, and I have lived in the city and raised my family here for 36 years. I'm also a proud member of the Jewish Council of Urban Affairs, or JCUA. JCUA, I have been working toward passage of the GAPA ordinance for the past 4 years. I personally became involved at the time of the Laquan McDonald murder by Jason Van Dyke. I was disgusted by the violence, the cover-ups, CPD's apparent blanket immunity, lack of ability to the public to serve and protect, and yes, for too many of the officers, their overt racism. I really have a simple message for the Public Safety Committee today. You have 2 proposals for civilian oversight on the table. Both CPAC and GAPA are the products of citizens, organizers, and attorneys spending literally thousands of hours organizing for exactly one thing. The community must have the power to hold CPD accountable when police violate the trust that our city places in them. That's it. Chicago's mayors have had that power. They have used it. Mayor Lightfoot has had close to 2 years forward a meaningful ordinance for civilian oversight. Her predecessors failed, and she failed to use their powers to effectively protect Chicago citizens. So for that reason alone, I urge you to not sit around waiting for Mayor Lightfoot to reinvent the wheel. The ordinance put forth from this committee, the community, and not from the fifth floor of City Hall. Although both CPAC and GAPA demand that community residents themselves have the authority to hold police accountable to meeting community needs, I'm speaking today on behalf of the GAPA ordinance. Under GAPA, the voice of the public through elected district councils, grounded in civilian oversight, and connecting the experience of ordinary Chicagoans in every neighborhood to impact CPD policy and procedures. Under GAPA, community members can call for an immediate review of the policy rather than waiting for over a year for events like the break-in at the home of Anjanette Young to come to light and waiting months for a review to be initiated. Under GAPA, residents of the city gain enormous powers to determine who is on the police board, who the mayor can select for chief. But the reality is the police themselves have enormous powers. Citizens of the city, through democratically elected district councils, are the best way to ensure a balance of power, to ensure police really do serve the community. Each of you is accountable to your constituents, and if we don't think you're serving the community, you can be voted out of office. If you're accountable to the public for your actions, why shouldn't the police who serve the community also be accountable for their actions? Pass the gap now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rothschild. Our next speaker is Mitchell Ward. Mr. Ward, are you with us? Mr.
Ward,
Mitchell Ward.
You were muted just a second ago. Please press *6 to unmute.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Mr. Ward. You may proceed. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Alderman, and the committee for holding this important hearing. My name is Mitchell Ward, and I am a theater worker and a tour guide from the 47th Ward. And I want to thank Alderman Matthew Martin for his continuous sponsorship of the CPAC ordinance. I'm speaking today to voice my total support for this ordinance. In December 1903, the city suffered the worst single building fire in U.S. history. That was the Iroquois Theater fire. The blaze was a result of ignorance and regulation of safety on that of the theater producers. But following the tragedy, Chicago enacted laws, real laws, that held building owners accountable, and thankfully fires of such a scale have not happened since. The troubles that plague our city today oftentimes seem insurmountable, not the least of which the loss of many Chicagoans to COVID-19, gun violence, and police brutality. And believe me, my least favorite question to be asked from a visitor to our city is, what about all the murders? The CPAC ordinance is the only of its kind that has the real probability to restore public confidence in the police department, which is a vital first step in restoring peace and wellness on our streets. I don't know any of us who don't desire such an outcome. Our officers deserve the respect of the people, and this will not come without real accountability, removed from the politicized arms of our city government. CPAC is real progressive reform. The days of police scandal followed by effectless reform have to end. The CPAC ordinance is a gesture of good faith to the people of Chicago. It has the teeth that GAPA, however well-meaning, notably lacks. CPAC is required for us to chip away at the ghosts of inequality, segregation, and racism that haunts us. I urge you to give the ordinance your full consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Our final speaker is the Reverend Richard Shelton. Reverend Shelton.
Chairman, Reverend Richard Shelton is not here.
Thank you. There being no further public speakers signed up for discussion of the day's agenda item, we will conclude our public comments. But let me thank each of the speakers for providing their testimony today and speaking upon this very important issue. Each of you should have received by email a copy of the Rule 45 report for the meeting held on December 8th, 2020. Are there any questions or comments from committee members regarding the report? There being no questions or comments, can I get a motion to approve the Rule 45 report by the same roll call vote as was applied to determine the quorum?
So moved.
So moved by Alderman Mitz. Hearing no objections, so ordered. As I stated earlier, we have one item for discussion on the agenda this morning. Item number one is the meeting. Yep.
Chairman Talaferro?
Is that Alderman Irvin?
Yes, it is.
Alderman Irvin, point of information or order?
Yes, I just wanted to be added to the roll call. I do apologize for logging in late.
I do have you on, President Alderman Irvin. Chairman Irvin, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Item number one is the meeting to accept into committee all substitute ordinance related to civilian oversight of the Chicago Police Department. Again, as I've stated earlier, there's no vote taken on this matter. Our first substitute ordinance as amended is the Civilian Police Accountability Council, known as the CPAC substitute. Can I get a motion to accept the CPAC substitute ordinance as amended into committee by the same roll call vote as was applied to determine the quorum?
So moved.
Again, so moved by Alderman Mitz. Hearing no objection, so ordered. Alderman Carlos Ramirez Rosas and Alderman Leslie Harris are both co-sponsors of the substitute as amended. Alderman Hairston or Alderman Ramirez Rosas, do either of you wish to make a comment regarding the substitute or to briefly explain the differences?
Yes, Chairman.
Go ahead and proceed, Alderman Ramirez Rosas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairman, and thank you so much to my fellow members of the City Council for hosting this meeting today. The substitute ordinance that you have before you today represents the most up-to-date and most researched version of the Civilian Police Accountability Council ordinance, supported by over 100 grassroots organizations, including the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, Black Lives Matter Chicago, SCIU Local 73, the Chicago Teachers Union, Trinity United Church of Christ, and so many other Black-led groups, church groups, youth groups, and civil rights groups from across our city. This substitute ordinance represents many months of volunteer work by legal experts, police accountability experts, including Professor Craig Futterman of the University of Chicago's Civil Rights and Police Accountability Project. This substitute ordinance addresses legal concerns and other concerns raised by some of the members of the City Council while staying true to CPAC's core tenets. As a reminder, the CPAC ordinance establishes an all-civilian, all-elected Civilian Police Accountability Council made up of one elected member for every 2 contiguous police districts for a total of 11 members. Council members must have at least 2 years of experience in civil rights work. The all-civilian council will be vested with the power to hire and fire the police superintendent, hire and fire the head of the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, COPA, hire and fire members of the police board, write and determine CPD policy, maintain final authority over CPD policy and COPA policy, maintain final authority over police board policy and disciplinary measures, including firing of officers and convening of grand juries, negotiate the CPD union contract, broaden the scope of investigations to include all allegations of misconduct, including sexual assault, oversee all COPA investigations of police misconduct, and maintain the power to subpoena officers. The substitute ordinance before you today makes the following changes. The substitute ordinance adds checks and balances and addresses legal concerns by stipulating that CPAC appoints the superintendent, COPA chief administrator, and police board with advice and consent of the City Council. Chicago voters may move to recall a CPAC counselor for cause. CPAC finds when cause exists to fire the superintendent, COPA chief administrator, or a police board member, and firing of any of them requires a majority vote in City Council. The substitute adds stipulations around mapping of police and CPAC districts. CPAC is no longer in charge of drawing the police district maps, since that determines the districts from which CPAC counselors are elected. Instead, CPAC districts are recommended by the department and approved by the police board. The substitute ordinance adds stipulations to the Chicago Police Department's budget. Under the substitute, CPD's budget is proposed by CPD to CPAC, and CPAC amends and approves this recommendation. CPAC also submits its recommendations publicly to the City Council, so the City Council and the public are aware of the budget submitted to the mayor by CPD and CPAC and what changes have been made. The budget then goes through the normal process for appropriations. This substitute also sets a ceiling that the CPD budget may not be more than 25% of the corporate fund amount from the year prior. And you can compare that to Los Angeles, which is 25.5% of their corporate budget, and New York City, which is just 7.7% of their corporate fund. The substitute ordinance also requires exploration of non-policing alternatives. CPAC must spend 20% of its budget on studying and piloting non-policing alternatives to policing, for example, violence interruption. The substitute ordinance addresses the issues of vacancies in a way that is consistent with law. Vacancies in CPAC will be filled in accordance with state law, which calls for election if 28 months or more remain in a term, or an election is at least 130 days away, or for a mayoral appointment otherwise. CPAC will have an advisory role on mayoral appointments. Given that the state of Illinois has not extended voting rights to non-citizen Illinoisans, the substitute ordinance establishes an immigrant advisory council for CPAC, which must include non-citizens and undocumented Chicagoans, to create representation for non-citizen residents within CPAC. The Immigrant Advisory Council is also responsible for investigating possible amendments to local and state laws to enfranchise non-citizens. The substitute ordinance adds stipulations around removal powers. Police board members, the chief administrator, and the superintendent all serve for a term of years, and all may be removed only for cause and only after a hearing. Removing any of them requires a majority vote in the city council. Under the substitute ordinance, deputy counselors have increased. CPAC must ensure that each police district has at least one deputy counselor at all times and at least 2 deputy counselors between the hours of 8 a.m. and midnight. The substitute ordinance also clarifies that there shall be collaboration between CPAC and the various bodies in creating or changing policy, and explicitly grants the department, COPA, and the police board the ability to make recommendations to CPAC on policy. Very importantly, I believe this substitute ordinance repeals the quote-unquote sworn member Bill of Rights, MCC 2-84-330. Such laws have been found to be detrimental to accountability and give police special rights not available to other city employees. As with all employees, protections for law enforcement officers are present in the relevant collective bargaining agreement. As for collective bargaining agreements, under the substitute ordinance, CPAC negotiates police contracts. An alternative provision has been added that takes effect if a court invalidates the power of CPAC to negotiate on behalf of the city, in which case CPAC would instead monitor contract negotiations and make public recommendations on the collective bargaining agreement. Lastly, but certainly not least, the substitute ordinance adds working with survivors of domestic violence as a way to satisfy qualifications of CPAC's candidate qualification stipulations in the ordinance. So as you can see, a lot of work has gone into this substitute ordinance to ensure that they're addressing concerns raised by members of this committee, by this council, and to ensure that CPAC can withstand a legal court challenge while at the same time ensuring that we have an all-civilian, all democratically elected police commission to really ensure that we have true accountability and that we really have the ability to ensure that the people of the city of Chicago have the justice and safety that they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Ramirez-Rosa. Alderman Leslie Harrison, do you wish to make a comment as co-sponsor of this substitute?
Well, I fully support what Alderman Ramirez-Rosa said. I think he summed it up very well, and I am on board. This has been more than 6 years in the making, and I think it's time that we have to take measures that have never been taken before, because we keep finding ourselves in the same position over and over again. So I fully support this, and I hope that my colleagues will consider joining me. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Ramirez-Rosa and Alderman Hairston for submitting your substitute. Our next substitute ordinance as amended is the Grassroots Alliance for Police Accountability, also known as the GAPA substitute. Can I get a motion to accept the GAPA substitute ordinance as amended into committee by the same roll call vote as applied to determine a quorum?
So moved.
So moved, Chairman.
Alderman Scott. So moved by Alderman Scott. Hearing no objections, so ordered. Chairman Rod Sawyer, as well as Chairman Harry Osterman, are the chief sponsors of this substitute. Do either one of you wish to make a comment regarding the substitute?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll make a brief comment, and I'm sure my co-sponsor might want to have something to say as well. Very quickly, I just want to thank GAPA and all the community groups that we've been working with since the summer of 2016 in getting this to where we are right now. Based on the task force, one of the central challenges was in improving public safety and building public trust and respect between police officers and the people that we serve and protect. Trust and respect aren't always just values we hold. They're necessary conditions for effective policing. So a key task force recommendation was to create a community board that would give Chicago residents a powerful role in the police oversight system. And what we have now is what we stated is what they call the two-tiered structure. The GAPA ordinance creates a citywide community commission with 7 commissioners nominated by elected district council members, selected by the mayor and confirmed by the city council. District councils in each of the 22 police districts with 3 members elected by the community that select and set priorities for the community commission. So that's 3 elected members in each of the 22 police districts. That's a total of 66 members citywide. Their powers would include working with district residents and police to develop local safety initiatives rooted in community concerns and priorities. Also to create and oversee a safe forum for residents to gather and voice their public safety concerns and solutions. They also the work to improve community police relations, ensure that the commission's work is informed by residents' concerns and priorities, and also importantly, to nominate commissioners. Now, the commission makeup is 7 civilians with relevant qualifications, including 2 spots for youth, for people between the ages of 18 and 24. Their powers would include playing a key role in selecting key public safety leaders. That would include the police commander, COPA, and the public safety inspector general. Establish goals and evaluate progress for CPD, COPA, and the police board. Draft, review, and approve CPD, COPA, and police board policy. Take a vote of no confidence in public safety leadership, and engage in community and increase transparency. What we felt with GAPA was we wanted to make sure that we're making the right fit, and I think it fits within the existing systems that we have now, and also increases accountability, includes front and back end accountability with a focus on prevention, and brings the community to the table with an equal voice. With that, the changes that we've made really were actually to beef up the original GAPA ordinance that we've introduced some years ago. So that would include the vote of no confidence, the input with policy recommendations to the police board and to CPD. And with that, I'll tag it on to my co-chair, who's been a really great partner, Alderman Harry Osterman.
Thank you, Alderman Sawyer. And members of the committee, I want to thank Chairman Taliaferro for having us both ordinances before us today to accept the substitutes and then queue this up for a vote that is, I think all of us agree, long overdue. Following up on Alderman Sawyer's comments, the core ordinance and substitute before you remains fairly consistent from the introduced ordinance we introduced years ago. Some of the small changes which the Alderman Sawyer brought up was the provision for a vote of no confidence for the superintendent, COPA chief, and police board members, the allowing for the commission to set priorities annually and review each of those agencies, the ability for the commission to comment to the members of the city council on the budget for CPD, in addition to initiating a COPA investigation. And the ability for citizens to call for a meeting of the commission. Those are some of the changes. The only change, we had a subject matter hearing back in October, which many of you were on. The substantive change since then is a provision for an interim board, which the council would work on establishing between now and July 15th until the first elections for district council members and the establishment of the committee, which would basically be in the election of November 22, followed by the establishment of the commission. Let me just say that this is something that we've all been working on for a number of years. The GAPA ordinance represents fundamental change that puts civilians in Chicago in an oversight and accountability role for CPD, COPA, and the police board. It's needed to establish and build and rebuild our trust, and it will create better policing in the city of Chicago that I believe strongly will lead to a safer Chicago. Alderman Sawyer and I in the GAPA coalition look to work with each of the members of the Public Safety Committee, the entire City Council, to pass this. And we look forward to working side by side with you and really begin to create this fundamental change that will bring civilians into a leadership role with the oversight of the CPD that I believe will lead to a safer Chicago. So we look forward to working closely with you to pass this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Sawyer and Chairman Osterman. Look, and I just want my colleagues to know as well, and the members of this committee, that we will schedule briefings for both ordinances in the month of January. I'm hoping to have those briefings scheduled over the next couple of weeks. We won't do them together so that each will have its its own opportunities for us to ask questions. It is my intent over the next couple of weeks to have briefings. I understand that representatives of the CPAC ordinance have already commenced briefings, but I don't want that briefings, and I think we all should attend that, but I don't want those briefings to negate the responsibility of this committee as well to brief on these ordinances. So there being no further business before the committee, can I get a motion to adjourn by the same roll call vote as applied to determine a quorum?
Motion to adjourn, Nick Spazzato.
So moved by Alderman Spazzato. Here, no objections. So ordered. The Committee on Public Safety is now adjourned. Thank you all for being here.